Welcome back, my friends. Pour yourself some tea and settle in, because the story is getting warmer. This continues my own take on these characters, built from the heart, not from the original ending. So let me pick up right where we left off. Last time, the fever broke. James opened his heart at the family table, took his medicine on his own, and finally let his family love him. But remember the question we ended on? The debt was still waiting. That mountain that started all of this. And James, lying there getting stronger, made a quiet decision. This time, he would not climb it alone. So, here's what happened that morning. James woke up with cool skin and clear eyes for the first time in days. He sat at the breakfast table, and instead of hiding the weight on his shoulders, he did something brave. He told the truth. "I've been carrying this debt by myself," he said, "and it made me sick. I don't want to do that anymore." Diep set down her bowl. Grandpa looked up. Even little Nye went quiet. And then Diep said the words that changed everything. "Then we'll carry it together. That's what family is for." You know what's beautiful about that? She didn't panic. She didn't blame him. She just opened her hands and said, "Give me half of that weight." Because a burden shared is a burden cut in two. That's not a saying. That's a truth this family was about to live. Here's what I find beautiful about this. James spent so long believing he had to be the strong one, the provider, the man who fixes everything alone. But real strength isn't carrying everything by yourself. Real strength is letting the people who love you help. James learned that the hard way, through a fever, but he learned it. So they sat down together, the whole family, and they did something they'd never done before. They talked about money honestly. Diep brought out a small notebook where she had quietly tracked every coin. The cheap pineapples, the medicine, the rice. She'd been managing the household on almost nothing, and she'd done it without one complaint. Grandpa offered the little savings he'd kept hidden for years, the money he was saving for his own old age. "Take it, son," he said. "What good is it sitting in a drawer while you suffer?" James shook his head at first, the old pride. But this time, it didn't win. He looked at his father's outstretched hand and understood. Refusing help wasn't humble. It was just pride wearing a polite mask. But here's what surprised me. It wasn't the money that moved James most. It was the willingness. The fact that his old father would empty his savings. That his wife would track every coin. That even Uncle quietly offered to take on extra work. They weren't waiting to be asked. They were already reaching. And that's when James understood something. The debt was big, but this family was bigger. For the first time, the mountain didn't look impossible. It just looked like something they would climb one careful step at a time, together, the same way they'd helped him walk to the dinner table. So the family had made their decision. They would face the debt together. But a decision is only the beginning. The real beauty was in what came next. In the small, steady ways they started rebuilding. Let me show you. James was still too weak to return to work right away, so he did something he'd never done before. He let Diep into the part of his life he'd always kept locked. He showed her the business, the numbers, the customers, the suppliers, the things he used to carry alone in his head until it made him sick. And here's what nobody expected. Diep was good at it. Really good. The same woman who counted coins at the pineapple stand had a sharp, careful mind for money. She looked at his accounts and saw things he'd missed. "You're paying too much here," she said gently. "And this customer owes you. Why haven't you asked them?" James stared at her, amazed. The wife he thought he was protecting turned out to be his greatest partner. What I love about this moment is how it flipped everything. For years, James thought love meant shielding Diep from his troubles. But love isn't a shield that keeps people out. It's a door that lets them in. The moment he opened that door, he discovered his wife wasn't fragile. She was formidable. Day by day, things began to shift. Diep handled the household and the books. Uncle picked up extra work and brought home what he earned without being asked. Grandpa watched overnight so the grown-ups could focus. And James, growing stronger every morning, started making calls again, but lighter now, because he wasn't alone on the phone anymore. There was one evening that stayed with me. The family sat together after dinner, and instead of worry hanging in the air, there was something new. Hope. Real, practical hope. Diep had worked out a plan. Small payments, steady ones, month after month. Not a miracle, just a path. And a path is all you need when you're walking it together. Nye climbed into James's lap and asked, "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" And James, who a week ago couldn't even lift his head, held her close and said, "Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be more than okay." And he meant it. You could hear it in his voice. The fear was gone, and in its place was something solid. Diep watched the two of them and felt her own heart fill. This was what she'd been fighting for. Through every bowl of porridge, every cheap pineapple, every sleepless night by his bed. Not just James getting well, the whole family standing tall again. And then something beautiful began to take shape. Because as the family pulled together, word started to spread about James and about a chance he never saw coming. The weeks were turning. James was nearly his old self now, but a better version, softer, wiser, no longer carrying everything alone. The household had found its rhythm, and just when things felt steady, a chance arrived that could change everything. It came through the most ordinary place, the pineapple stand. Remember the seller Diep bought from? Back when she counted every coin? Over those long weeks, Diep had become a familiar face there. Kind words, honest dealing, a warm smile even in her hardest days. And the seller had noticed. People remember kindness. It plants seeds you can't see. One morning, the pineapple seller mentioned something. A relative needed a reliable supplier for a small business, someone honest, someone who delivered on a promise. "I thought of you and your husband," the seller said. "You two are good people. Good people are hard to find. A small connection. But sometimes the biggest doors open through the smallest hands." Diep brought the news home, and the family gathered around the table once more. James listened, and you could see the old businessman waking up inside him, but calmer this time, wiser. This wasn't a chance to chase alone until it made him sick again. This was a chance to build together, and here came the big moment. James stood up at that table, still a little thin from his illness, and looked at the faces around him. His father, his wife, his daughter, his brother. The people who had pulled him back from the dark, and he made a promise out loud. "Whatever we build from here," he said, "we build as a family. No more secrets, no more carrying it alone. We decide together, we work together, and we share whatever comes." Diep reached across the table and took his hand. Grandpa nodded, his eyes wet, and Nee clapped, not fully understanding, but feeling the joy in the room. It wasn't a grand mansion or a pile of gold. It was something better. It was a family that had learned how to stand together, with a real chance in front of them and the strength to chase it as one. That night, the debt didn't feel like a mountain anymore. It felt like a hill they were already climbing, hand in hand. This is the part that gives me hope. James didn't get a miracle that erased his problems. He got something far more lasting. He got a family that turned his weakness into their shared strength. And a man with a family like that is never truly poor. So the plan is in motion. The opportunity is real. James is strong. Diep is leading with that quiet brilliance of hers. And the whole family is pulling in the same direction at last. But there's one moment still waiting. The moment this family finally steps fully into the light. When all their care and sacrifice blooms into the happiness they've earned. And what I believe comes next will be the most beautiful moment of all.